Everybody, welcome to a very special version of Story Hour. We've got A.T. Greenblatt and Barbara Krasnoff here again. They were here a week ago last Wednesday night, and we have a repeat performance because while the Zoom session was live and a rousing success, and we had a nice modest audience for unfortunately, the Facebook live stream cratered, and that was due to a configuration error on my end, which I have since corrected. So we're basically having a second performance, and folks will be able to pick up on the recorded live stream and enjoy these two wonderful writers. So welcome to Story Hour. I'm your host. I'm Daniel Marcus. My co-host is Laura Blackwell, and I hope that you're all healthy and safe and that you're taking care of yourselves and your loved ones. We're still, in spite of some good news on the COVID front, we're still somewhat shut in. We're still locked down, and we're still looking for ways to amuse and enlighten ourselves. So the point of Story Hour is to turn to one of the oldest forms of entertainment in human history. And that's basically a couple of folks sitting around the fire telling lies to each other. So every week, we've got two authors, about 30 minutes each, doing exactly that. And each week, we also offer a couple of brief PSAs, suggesting how, if you're in a position to do so, if you're that fortunate, that you might help your communities. And if you're not, that's totally cool, but just these are great organizations to be aware of. So our readers tonight are A.T. Greenblatt, Barbara Krasnoff. Barbara is reading for Planned Parenthood, which is a truly essential organization. We all know about Planned Parenthood. They provide a huge range of health services and education, including general wellness, pregnancy testing, STD testing and treatment, LGBT health services, men's health services, abortion services, and on and on and on. It's a truly essential organization, PlannedParenthood.org. Eliza is reading tonight for the Westchester Food Cupboard. The Westchester Food Cupboard commits to provide a variety of fresh and non-perishable healthy food to those in need. So if you're here via Zoom, you might have wandered in here this afternoon. Please mute your mic, but feel free to leave your camera on because we'd love to see you, but not necessarily to hear you while our authors are reading. And feel free to use chat. Our Facebook Live friends, feel free to comment. We love to read your comments, although of course we can't see them. We can't see you and we can't see the comments in real time because we're busy. So we have a great program this afternoon. We're going to start with Eliza. Is that okay? I didn't. So A.T. Greenblatt is a mechanical engineer by day and a writer by night. She lives in Philadelphia, where she's known to frequently subject her friends to various cooking and home brewing experiments. She's a graduate of Viable Paradise 16 and Clarion West 2017. Yay, Clarion West. Her work has won a Nebula Award, has been in multiple years' best anthologies, and has appeared in Uncanny, Beneath Ceaseless Skies, and Clark's World, really great venues, as well as other fine publications. And you can find her online at atgreenblatt.com and on Twitter at atgreenblatt. So please, Eliza, take it away.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I am going to read a story that was published in Clark's World about a year ago. It's called Move Forward, Disappear, Transcend. So, I lost my favorite fingers as I was walking to the library. Spotting it from the corner of my eye, I glanced down. A gasp seized up in my throat. Instead of the long, beautifully expertly manicured prosthetics that Sonia made me, there were 10 empty nubs. And the grief I've been carrying around these last few months grew heavier. I scanned the tall reeds around me, hoping that maybe I simply dropped them. But it was pointless. It was impossible to find anything in the city anymore. Downtown was more like a wilderness preserve than the vibrant cityscape I knew as a girl. The buildings were covered in ferns, and wildflowers grew where the roads used to be. My allergies would have been terrible if I still had sinus cavities. There are a few advantages to being so old that you're mostly clone parts and inorganic replicas. The strip of Theseus of the flesh. I stared at my incomplete hands, fighting back the tight sob in my chest. In a moment of weakness, I tapped the side of my temples with my knuckles and messaged Frida. I've lost my fingers. I blinked and took a snap at my hands, palms up, and sent that too. The ones with the indigo manicure? Are you sure you didn't leave them at home, Mom? He messaged back. Of course I was sure. I would never so carelessly lose something my second wife made me. But I wasn't going to risk an argument about it. Of my many children, Frida was the only one who still responded to my messages. I took a deep breath. I was far too old to get emotional in the middle of the street. Instead, I smoothed my hair with my palms and looked ahead, because there was nothing else to do but keep moving forward. That was what I always told my children. I continued towards the library. When I arrived, the librarian was at the desk, wearing a transcendent body that made him look like a model from an Andy Warhol painting. Unlike me, his body was completely synthetic. Sorry. Unlike me, his body was completely synthetic. Hello, Limpe, I said, hiding my hands behind me, the nubs of my missing fingers sharp against the small of my back. How are you today? Hi, Ms. Y, he said brightly. Studio room 4 is all set. The students are eager to meet you. Wonderful. My apartment was too old to support a personal VR room. Thank goodness for libraries. Limpe moved like a dancer as he led me to the empty studio and booted the school's program for me. A few seconds later, the studio became a perfect replica of a 1930s apartment. Of a 2030s apartment. Nothing like my real apartment, of course. Mine didn't have so much clutter, and my taste in decor was much less old-fashioned. I always disliked this scene design of the program. It made me feel like an alien in my own history. But I didn't have the heart to tell them. I didn't have the heart to tell that to the program managers. They were so excited to have me as part of the Living History project. I took a seat in the middle of the living room, carefully tucking my fingerless hands in my pocket. 2 minutes later, my audience appeared. The kids sat on the couches and chairs and floor, facing me. I guess they were about 8 years old. Some of them seemed interested in their surroundings. Some looked wrapped up in their feeds, in their head. I had to resist shaking my head. Children didn't know how to multitask anymore. The boy closest to me had bright red hair. I was tempted to reach out and tussle it, but that would have been ridiculous. I was the only non-projector thing in the studio. I put on my brightest smile. Hello, everyone. Who do I have the pleasure of speaking with today? They introduced themselves as Oakwood Primary's 4th-year students from Melbourne. I gave my little opening speech. Who I was, how old, what my life was, way back when, what it's like now, what it was like to be one of the first people to ever transcend. You don't look like you've transcended. No, I agree. Because I transcended so long ago, I don't have the right tech installed to be completely relocated. What does that mean? What does that mean? I had asked my children as I sat in the doctor's office when they first mentioned replacing my failing lungs with inorganic replicates. It means you'll be around for a long time, Mom, Frida said, squeezing my hands. It means I was upgraded in pieces, I explained, and that I'm not completely synthetic, even now. The kids look impressed. So is that why you have wrinkles? Yes, and don't I look fabulous? I replied, tossing my hair back and striking a pose. The kids giggled and I smiled. It amused me that I was an ancient relic to them, even though physically I hadn't aged since I was 65. Did you know, I said, that before we had common plants up here, I almost tapped the side of my temple, but remembered my missing fingers at the last moment. I tilted my head instead. That we sent messages with something called a phone? The kids giggled again. Ms. Y, you said message. It's called a dash. Gran, you've got to keep up the new tech, my grandkids said, laughing. But I could tell they were worried. They were in their 70s, but wearing transcendent bodies that looked 30. We don't want you to get left behind. I'm trying, dears, really. We know, Gran. Oops, I said, smiling through my embarrassment. Can you tell us more about what it was like when you were younger, Miss Y? The teacher said, with a sympathetic expression. Silently, I thanked the teacher and took the opportunity to steer the conversation into familiar territory. I told him about what gaming on a console was like, how we traveled to visit places because we didn't have implants, or realistic VR yet. I explained that if you wanted to eat, you had to make your own food or have someone else do it for you. They stared at me in a mixture of horror and disbelief. But why didn't you print it? Because back then, printers could only make things in plastic and metal, I replied. We actually had to practice to make good food. The future is so much better then. You can't go, I told Sonia, clutching her hands in the hospital, as her original organs and new clones failed and died indiscriminately. The future will be worth living for. I'm sorry, love, but I think it's just my time. The future is better, I agreed out of habit. But in that moment, the grief I've been carrying around these last 3 months, ever since I stunk a look at Frida's personal messages, puts his cold hand on my chest and squeezed. Until recently, I really did believe the future was brighter. We have to go soon. Any last questions for Ms. Y? The teacher said. Aren't you sad you can't transcend beyond your body? What if you're the last person left one day? The boy with red curly hair asked. How can you just abandon your body, I demand, when Rue, my third and last husband, broke the news that he was transcending. Really transcending. We promised we'd always be here for each other. What about me? I'm sorry, dear. Nothing personal. I just want to see my grandkids and great-grandkids again. Leo, the teacher reddens with embarrassment. Oh, that's all right, I said, turning to the boy. No, I'm not worried. If I've learned something over the years, it's that I've always had things to care about right here. I tried to smile, but the feeling of the nubs of my fingers against my thighs made it impossible. And as I sat there among the children, this fresh generation, the memories of sipping through Frida's personal stream of messages 3 months ago haunted me. It was like a mother spying on a teenage daughter, even though we were both far too old for that. Still, I felt guilty about it, but Frida had grown distant. My daughter, my last relative that hadn't upgraded beyond my capabilities yet. The only one I could still see and communicate with. In her message stream, I found 4 different information packets about taking the next step guides about transcending beyond the physical body. I knew then that one day soon, my daughter would disappear too. Every year, Frida throws a fabulous party for her birthday. Mine's only 4 days after hers, So a joint celebration is something we've been doing for decades. She always offers to host, and I'm always happy to let her take charge. I was embarrassingly late to the party, but my brown eyes were missing that afternoon, the latest piece of me to disappear. They hadn't been my favorite, but they were closest to what my original eyes had been, and recently I found myself using them almost daily. After an hour of frantic searching, I gave up and agonized over which pair to wear instead. Many of my other pairs were noticeable and brighter, something I used to delight in. But now they felt like they belonged to a different person, or another life. In the end, I chose to wear my green ones, with hazel flecks, to the party. These eyes were lucky, I told myself. I've been wearing these eyes when I met my last husband, Rue. By the time I arrived, there were about 2,000 transcended bodies in Frida's apartment. Her home was tastefully retro, favoring the shiny surfaces and severe lines of the early 22nd century. Most of Frida's friends and lovers were new retro too, looking like they stepped off a 2120 stream. All loose-fitting, flowing clothes and short cuts, curls close to their scalps. There were few people in attendance this year than last, though, an unsettling trend in the last decade. Once, Frida's party spilled over with guests. "Happy birthday, Mom!" I turned, and there was my daughter. She looked nothing like when I last saw her, choosing mods that made her body curvy, complete with an A-line haircut and dimpled cheek. But I could have recognized that smile, the way she moved her hands, on anything she wore. "Happy birthday yourself," I replied. "Sorry I'm late." I was getting worried. "I sent you a message." Frida laughed. No one's called them messages in decades, Mom. It's dashes now." I smiled. "I know, but I'm a stubborn antique." "Not to me." She took my hand. "Come on, let's go mingle." Frida's friends were polite, as always, asking about my work with the Living History Project and my health. Those were safe topics. Most people knew that modern tech and organic matter were incompatible, so I couldn't get the upgrades I needed to follow the latest feeds. In many ways, the guests reminded me of the school children I talked with. Conversations felt more like an interview, and everyone seemed so, well, young. When the talk turned, as it always did, to who among their acquaintances were transcending, I excused myself to the kitchen, claiming to need some water. I didn't, but it was the only empty room in the apartment. The kitchen was a relic of another time, no longer required, like me. I looked at my hands, relieved that my second favorite fingers were still there. But then grief threatened to overwhelm me, and I had to steady myself on the edge of the counter. Today, my youngest daughter turned 167. On Wednesday, I would be 214. And of my numerous friends, lovers, family, and descendants over my extended life, she was the only one left with a physical body. The rest had disappeared to places I couldn't reach. "You okay, Mom?" Frida stood in the doorway of the kitchen, leaning against the threshold. I stood up straight and smoothed my hair. "You're always worried about me." "Of course. I don't want to lose you, Mom." "Even when you transcend past a body?" Frida bit her lip for a moment, looking guilty, and so much like the child she once was. "How did you know?" A mother's instinct. She set herself next to me by the kitchen counter, staring through the doorway at the friends in the other room. "It's getting harder," she said. "Yeah." We were silent for a few minutes, watching the guests in their beautifully crafted bodies that would never gain muscle, change shape, or get wrinkles. No one could move forward in this state. "I think," I said slowly, through the grief, the ache in my chest. I think this should be our last birthday party. What do you? Frida began. And then she realized, and her eyes went wide. Oh, I can't just leave you, Mom. When was the last time you talked to your children? Your grandchildren? Great-grandchildren? I have some greats that are still too young to transition. Her eyes glistened. But it's not really the same, is it? I shook my head. You should reconnect with them, I said, before they become unrecognizable. What about you? I'll be fine. They started communities for us first transcenders, you know. I didn't. I'll be fine, I said again, and gave him my most reassuring smile. It was a lie, of course. My eyes, fingers, and a dozen other pieces of me had disappeared these last 3 months, and I had no idea why. Perhaps my memory, which has served me so well for over 2 centuries, was overfull and leaking information. But maybe, like Sonia, it was just my time to go. I don't tell Frida any of this. Instead, I reach out and pull into a tight embrace. A moment later, I feel her arms wrap around me too. My daughter and I held each other in a small, useless kitchen. Neither of us were willing to end the moments first. Too many happy returns, love, I said. Like you always say, Mom, let's keep moving forward. Yes. I squeezed her tightly one last time, and then let her go. And that's what I got.
That was lovely. Thank you so much. You always pause a moment between stories to let them echo a little bit, let them resonate, sink in before we move on to the next.
Especially appropriate after that one. All echoes and resonance.
Mhm.
Yeah, sorry if I brought the room down.
Oh no, not at all. I
It was wonderful.
actually just feel kind of
It
transported.
was just wonderful.
Thank you.
Lovely work. Thank you so much. Barbara, welcome back. Barbara
Thank
Krasnoff
you.
has had short stories in over 45 print and online publications, including Space and Time, Andromeda Spaceways, Mythic Delirium, Abyss and Apex, and a multitude of others. Her story Sabbath Line, which was published in the anthology Clockwork Phoenix 5, was a Nebula finalist. The History of Soul 2065 from Mosaic Novel follows several generations of 2 mystical Jewish families from the past into the future. She currently earns her living as reviews editor at The Verge. You can find her website at brooklynwriter.com. Barbara, take it away.
Thank you so much. And I'm so really pleased to be here, and thank you for redoing this. I basically, I'm going to be reading the first story in my book, The History of Soul 2065, which is right over here, see? And which can be found at Amazon and at the mythicdelirium.com site, which is where it was published. This story is called The Clearing in the Autumn, a story of Chana, Rivka, Krasulka, and Sophia Stein, and it starts in 1914. Chana had seen a real forest once, when she was 6 years old. Her parents had taken her to the wedding of a relative in another town, not one all that far from Kiev. Tremendously excited, she had spent nearly the entire journey kneeling on the seat with her nose pressed against the train window as stations and farms and towns sped by. And then, at one point, they went through an endless tangle of trees, dark and thickening and frightening. It was a forest, her father told her, and forests were not only full of trees and birds and mushrooms and other delightful things, but also contained wolves and bandits. What kind of bandits, Chana asked, intrigued at the thought. Like the little robber girl in the Snow Queen? At which point her mother made her sit back in her seat and informed her that the trees also hid the spirits of dead children who would lure little girls to come and play with them and then steal them away from the world of the living. Well, even at 6 years of age, Chana knew that her mother was just trying to frighten her. The rabbi's wife, who taught the young children their letters and numbers, had explained that the spirits of the dead, when they did walk the earth, were forced to stay by their graves unless a vulnerable body presented itself. That was why the children weren't allowed to attend funerals. They were too new to this world to defend themselves against possible attack by a dybbuk or other wandering soul. So the dead children couldn't possibly be in the forest unless they had been accidentally buried there. In addition, the idea of having ghost children to play with was an intriguing one. Chana knew her mother well enough not to say so, but somewhere inside herself, she hid the hope that one day she would meet a real ghost child. Unfortunately, there weren't many opportunities. Lvov, where Chana lived, was large and modern, and she somehow suspected that ghosts and spirits preferred forests and glens rather than noisy streets. Even the local park, where her parents and aunts and uncles took her on Sundays when it was fine, was so carefully cultivated that Chana suspected anything supernatural would avoid it like the plague. Until one sunny afternoon. They had eaten a lovely picnic lunch in the park, and now the grown-ups were arguing about politics, and Chana's cousins, most of whom were older, were avidly examining the fashion illustrations in a magazine. Bored to distraction, Chana asked her mother if she could go for a walk. Don't go far, her mother warned her absent-mindedly, absorbed in her conversation. Chana called out, I promise, and left quickly, before her mother had any chance to change her mind. She walked down a small gravel path, kicking at the occasional stone and making up stories in her head about how she would become rich and famous when she was older. And then looked up and discovered that she was at the beginning of a small pathway that led into a grove of large, well-grown trees. A forest. Of course, it wasn't a real forest, not a full-sized hike for days and be lost forest. But maybe, once inside, she could pretend it was a real forest. At the very least, she'd be able to leave the manicured lawns and metal benches behind. The late afternoon sunlight filtered through the trees, muting the sounds of the town behind her. The path was narrow, even for a young girl, and sometimes the trees pulled at her dress or caught at her hair, tugging strands away from her tight braid. Chana walked slowly, enjoying the sense of secrecy and possible danger, occasionally stopping to admire a wild flower or to pick up a small stone so that she could throw it into the trees and watch the startled birds go off. And then there was sunlight dappling a soft green carpet and space on either side. Chana looked around. She had reached a small clearing that had a canopy of branches overhead. Before her, resting on the grass and dandelions, there were 3 logs, the remains of a tree that had fallen ages and ages ago. Chana grinned and spun around, taking it all in. At last, she had her own secret place. After she had examined the area thoroughly, Chana sat on the grass next to one of the logs, which had a large hole in it that was just the right size for a tiny apartment. The girl arranged stones and branches into furniture and stick dolls, occasionally looking out of the corners of her eyes just in case any ghostly children were lurking nearby. But to her disappointment, none made an appearance. Chana, Rivka, so this is where you disappeared to. It was her father, hot and annoyed. Your mother has been frantic. He gave her a swift swat on the behind, grabbed her hand, and walked her back to the picnic. As she was led away, Chana gave a quick glance behind to keep the small clearing in her memory. She'd return as soon as she could. And she did every chance she got. As Chana got older, the clearing became more than just a quiet place to play. It was somewhere where she could escape from the other girls at school who teased her unmercifully because she was sent out of the room when the priest came to give the catechism lesson. From her mother, who complained that her daughter was ungrateful for all the money they spent making sure she had a good Russian education rather than being sent to the local Jewish day school. And from the world, so she could read her books uninterrupted and dream about the day when she would be old enough to travel and see wondrous things. On the day after her 11th birthday, which happened to be a Saturday, Chana tucked one of her birthday presents into her rucksack, The Penknife by Sholem Aleichem, a worn but still legible book that Chaim the Litvak, who sold books and pens from a small booth in the marketplace, had given her. With that, and an early apple that she had found near one of her grandmother's trees, she was ready for at least an hour to herself. She took the path at a run, eager to get as much reading time in as she could. She flew into the clearing and stopped short. There was already somebody there. For one mad moment, Chana thought that her mother had told her the truth all those years ago and that she had interrupted a wandering ghost. The girl was about the same age as Chana, but where Chana was of medium height and a little stout, the girl was tall and rather aristocratic. She wore a white lacy dress with a wide blue sash and matching stockings, pretty white shoes, and a straw hat with a blue ribbon. If she wasn't a ghost, Chana thought maybe she was a character come alive from a storybook. It wasn't the kind of clothing that you usually saw in Lvov. The girl had been intently watching a butterfly that was hovering around a small bush. When Chana stepped in on a twig, she turned around and stared. "Who are you?" the girl asked. If she was a ghost, she was a very substantial one. At her movement, the butterfly darted away. "I'm Chana," she said, acutely aware of the contrast between the girl's elegance and of her own dark green one-piece school uniform, torn black stockings, and scuffed black shoes. "I live near here, and I go to the National Girls' School. I've never seen you before. Are you visiting?" The girl's eyes came down as though what Chana said didn't make any sense. "You can't live near here," she said. "I'd know it if you did. And anyway, you have a funny accent. My name is Sophia, and this is my birthday dress. My papa made it all himself. He sews dresses for rich ladies and said that I look just as pretty as any of them. Do you think it's pretty?" Chana thought it was the most beautiful dress she had ever seen, but she did not want to say so. Also, she thought it a bit rude to comment on her accent, especially when the girl's was so strange. But before she could make any reply, the girl, Sophia, chatted on happily. "This forest belongs to a very rich lady. It's part of what they call an estate, and my papa said I could wear my new dress to meet her. The lady said I could explore a little while papa measures her for a dress to wear at her daughter's wedding, and then we'll come back for the try-on. And Cook said if I were a good girl and kept very quiet in a corner, I could watch them make the wedding cake and might even be able to see the bride try on her dress, which would be wonderful, don't you think? Oh, don't." Chana, fascinated by the girl's chatter, had sat down on a nearby log. At Sophia's dismayed cry, she looked around. "Don't what?" "Sit on that log. There are all sorts of bugs and things on that log, and you'll get your dress dirty." Chana shrugged. "I'm always getting my dress dirty. My mama says I'm worse than any boy, but I don't care." "Well," the girl frowned, then her face brightened. "Well, maybe because your dress is green, and so dirt won't show so much. I couldn't sit down in this dress, though, because it's white, and my papa would be angry, and I couldn't see the wedding cake. What are you going to be when you grow up?" It took a moment for Chana to realize she actually had been asked a question. And in fact, Sophia had paused expectantly. Chana thought for a moment and said, "It's a secret. Can you keep a secret?" "Of course." Sophia came a couple of steps closer. "What is it?" Chana hugged her knees and stared at Sophia. "When I'm old enough, I'm going to run away to St. Petersburg and become a doctor." Sophia looked a little surprised, as though she hadn't expected quite so grandiose a scheme. "Girls can't become doctors." "Oh, yes, they can now." Chana took a branch and pushed it through the leaves on the ground. "They've got a university there now that teaches girls to become doctors. My big brother read about it in the newspaper. And my science teacher says I'm one of the smartest girls in her class. I'll become a great doctor and will come back in my own carriage and horses, and all the girls will want me to treat them and will have to pay me lots of money before I'll do it." She looked up triumphantly. So there. She waited for the laughter or the jeering, but Sophia just nodded and said, "And do you know what I'm going to be?" She backed off a little and spread her arms theatrically. Chana thought she could guess. "An actress?" "Yes, or a great singer." Sophia came closer again, her eyes shining. "My papa took me to see Hansel and Gretel at the National Theater. We sat all the way high up like birds, my papa said. And he gave me a pair of real opera glasses so I could see the singers close up. It was the most beautiful thing you ever saw. And they had children on stage, though my papa said Hansel and Gretel were actually both played by grown-up ladies. And I asked him if I could grow up to be one of them. And he said, who knows? So that's what I want to do." "Which National Theater?" asked Chana as soon as Sophia stopped to take a breath. "The one in Munich, of course," Sophia said. "We took a train. It's only a short trip." Chana stared. "Munich, Germany?" she asked. "Because over there," she pointed, "is where my school is. We live in Lvov." Sophia tossed her head scornfully. Her hat flew off, revealing shiny auburn hair cropped to her shoulders. "Where is that?" she asked, retrieving her hat and brushing dirt off it. "Because I never heard of it, and I got top scores in geography this year." Chana, whose own brown hair was confined in a tight braid, admired the way the other girl's carefully brushed hair bounced around her face. Still, she put her hands on her hips and said with as much authority as she could muster, "Well, I've got top marks in all my classes, including history, and I should know in which city I live." The two girls glared at each other fiercely. "I'd fight you, but I don't want to ruin my dress," Sophia said almost tearfully. "I'd fight you," said Chana, "but I'd win, and I'm too old to pick on somebody weaker than me." "You wouldn't," said Sophia. "Would so," said Chana. As if to join the argument, a small gray pigeon suddenly dropped down to the ground between them. It shook itself, looked around, and then took a tentative, limping step forward. "Look," Sophia said, her anger forgotten, "it's hurt." One of the pigeon's wings was slightly outstretched. As it tried to walk, it made a small, unhappy sound. The two children knelt down and examined the bird. "Maybe we should put the wing in a splint," said Sophia. "My cousin broke his arm, and the doctor put it in a splint until it healed. He cried although he lied later and said he didn't," she added with some satisfaction. Chana looked doubtful. "I'm not sure we could do it properly," she said. "We might hurt it more. We need to take it to a grown-up who knows how to fix animals." She carefully reached out and put her hands around the soft, feathered body. "Oh, be careful," Sophia said, alarmed. "It might peck you." But although the pigeon shivered at Chana's touch, it didn't otherwise react. She stood, her hands wrapped protectively around the bird. "Do you know a doctor?" asked Sophia, also standing. She reached over and stroked the pigeon carefully. "There's a doctor who fixed my cousin's arm, but he probably doesn't do animals." "I'll take it to my grandmother," Chana said decisively. "She cured the cat when its tail got run over by a cart. I'll bet she can fix the bird. If I take it home right now, it might be all right." The two stared at each other for a moment. "But can we both go home?" asked Sophia tentatively. I mean, if I'm visiting the Russian class and you're in Lvov, then one of us is in the wrong place. Isn't that right? Chana thought a moment. Maybe it's this place. Maybe it's magic, and when we leave, we'll go back where we belong. Sophia brightened. So maybe we could both come back next week, the same time. That way you could tell me what happened to the pigeon. She paused and thought, that is, if I can come, I can ask my father if I can visit. Chana nodded. I don't know if I can come either. My brother told me that there was political trouble and that meant we had to be extra careful and that maybe I'll have to stay home from school a few days. Her expression cleared. But even if they keep me in, I can always sneak out. We have to swear, though, or it won't be any good. Sophia straightened and recited formally. I swear that I will never reveal to anyone about our secret place or anything we say here. May the evil eye find me otherwise. And I swear, proclaimed Chana, and that we will meet again no matter what evil angels try to drive us apart. Sophia held up 2 fingers and spit through them 3 times. And I swear, Chana repeated. She shifted the pigeon awkwardly to her right arm, brought her left hand to her mouth, and copied Sophia's actions. The 2 girls stared at each other solemnly and then broke out into giggles. The pigeon squawked, and they immediately sobered again. I'm sorry, pigeon, Sophia said guiltily. Chana carefully took the bird back into both her hands. Around them, the clearing was starting to darken as the sun dipped below the tops of the trees. The breeze died down for a moment, and in the stillness, there was a low rumble of thunder. Well, I guess we'd better go, Sophia said, brushing some leaves off her dress. I'll see you this time next week or the week after if we're punished. If you come and I'm not there, leave me a note under that rock. She pointed at a medium-sized rock that sat under a downed branch, and let me know what happened to the pigeon. All right, said Chana. She watched as her new best friend turned and ran into the woods, the white dress quickly lost amid the darkening trees. In her arms, the pigeon shivered again. 1920. We're leaving, Chana said to the trees. We're going to America. Summer was almost over. Autumn was just a golden edge to the leaves and a hint of chill in the air. It was just the kind of crisp, clear day that Chana loved when she was a little girl. But she wasn't a little girl anymore. The clearing looked almost the same as it had the day she and Sophia met for the first and only time. Chana sat cross-legged on the ground and picked up a sturdy twig. Did you ever get back here after we met, Sophia? She asked, scratching a small stick figure of a girl in the dirt. Did you come and I wasn't here? I'm sorry if you did. I tried to come back, I really did, but was never able to. When I got home, my parents told me that there was going to be a war and that I was no longer allowed to leave the house alone. Even when I got work at the hospital, I had to promise to be escorted either way. And then later, we had to hide. She took a breath. I don't know what it was like where you are, Chana continued, using the twig to push through a few dead leaves that scattered the ground, but the war was bad here. And then there was the pogrom last November. Papa was smart. At the beginning of the war, he made arrangements with Mrs. Sokolov, a nice old woman who lived nearby and whom my mother was good friends with. So when we heard that the Jewish militia had been disbanded, we all ran and hid in her barn. She had cleared a small spot and now used the twig to dig into the loosely packed dirt. After 3 days, Mrs. Sokolov said she'd heard it was safe for us to go home. My brother Jakob went to check and came back and said it was true, but that there wasn't much to go home to. Her lower lip trembled, but she mastered it and dug harder. People had broken the doors and windows of our house and took all our things, except for some of the furniture, which was all broken. All my mama's clothes were torn up and my books. She paused. Although we were lucky, Jakob's wife Gittel, he got married last year. Her family didn't hide in time and her father was hurt and her sister, Well, I'm not supposed to talk about her sister. The tears started to flow despite her best efforts. So now we're going to America. I begged Papa to let me stay and go to St. Petersburg to the Women's Doctors' University because now there's been a revolution and everybody is going to be equal. There's no reason I shouldn't go. I met a young man last year, a musician, who had left the army to join the revolution. And he said that there were a lot of young people there and there would be housing for women students. He even gave me a red kerchief to remember him by and said I should look for him when I came to St. Petersburg. But Papa says it's not safe, especially for a girl of 16, and that the family needs to stay together. It's not fair. She took a breath and wiped her eyes and nose on her sleeve. I guess you're not here, she said. She then stood and turned around slowly, trying to impress the scene in her mind for the rest of her life. The small grassy clearing, the tall, strong trees just beyond, and the clouds streaming overhead. And although there were a few leaves on the ground, enough remained on the trees so that the branches that stretched out over the clearing blocked out the late afternoon sun. There was a chill in the air. It was time to leave. Chana took a breath and began to walk toward the path when, amid the green and brown and gold of the foliage around her, she spied a flash of blue. She walked slowly towards it, afraid it was an illusion, a reflection from a drop of water or a shadow. But no, it was a limp piece of ribbon faded to a pale blue-gray by the elements, tied with a series of knots to a tree root that pushed out of the ground. Chana knelt and felt the smooth piece of material as though it could tell her something. Next to the root was a large gray stone. Chana wrapped her hands around it and pushed at it. It took a bit of effort, but she was able to move it aside. Underneath the stone was what looked like a top of a tightly stoppered jam jar, buried in the soil. Chana reached for a nearby branch and dug at the dirt around the jar until she could pull it from the ground. It contained a single piece of paper, folded several times. Chana opened the jar with some difficulty. Moisture and dirt made the lid resistant to her grip, pulled the paper out, and carefully unfolded it. In precisely lettered but badly spelled Yiddish, it read, "Dear Chana, I hope you are well and not dead. My uncle Kurt died in the war, and my mother is very ill. So we're going to Berlin to stay with my grandmama and find a doctor who can make my mother well. So I may not be able to come back to the forest in the estate for a while. And I left this to you, so you'll know I didn't forget. Did the pigeon get better? Most sincerely yours, Sophia Stein." Chana sat on the ground and read the letter twice. Then she reached into her backpack, pulled out her pen, turned the letter over, and put it on her backpack so she could use it as a writing surface, and paused. She thought about all the other things she had wanted to tell Sophia, about her second cousin who had run away to America in order to stay out of the army and who promised to find them someplace to live, about the musician who had bright blue eyes and the most beautiful smile she'd ever seen, and who gently kissed her on the lips before he left for the city, about what it was like to hide beneath a pile of hay, the smell of horse manure and fresh grass around her, her mouth dry with fear, listening to the shouts of drunken men outside and praying that they wouldn't decide to investigate the barn. But what little light there was in the clearing was starting to fade, and there wasn't time to write it all down. Chana wet the tip of her pen with her tongue, thought for a moment, and wrote, "Dear Sophia, the pigeon recovered and flew away. We're going to New York City in America. If you can, come to America as well and find me. Very sincerely, Chana Rivka Krasulka." She folded the paper, put it back in the jar, and placed the jar in its hole. After burying it, she stopped, sat back on her heels, and stared at the small mound for a moment. She untied the faded blue ribbon and put it into her pocket. Then she reached into her backpack, took out the red kerchief, and tied it firmly to the root. "We will meet again," she told the kerchief. "I swear." She stood and left the clearing. Thank you.
My.
Yeah.
Really wonderful evocation of time and place.
We had two stories today about places that were defined by people sharing them.
Hmm.
And it just hit me what an amazing metaphor that is for what we're doing here in the first place. And I'm a little. Thank you both.
Yeah. Boy, I just feel so grateful and fortunate that we get to do this, Laura. We get to listen to such wonderful work. I really appreciate your partnership. And thank you all again.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for having us. This is
Yeah,
always fun.
Yeah.
for sure. Really great work, both of you. And folks, if you are joining us for a special story hour session, thanks very much for checking in. We're really glad that we could correct the mishap from the other week to have these two wonderful readings ensconced in Facebook for posterity. So thank you all out there. And again, thanks to the authors. We're back Wednesday, of course, as we are every Wednesday. We will have CSE Cooney and Carlos Hernandez. We're really looking forward to seeing both of them here.
Oh, they're fun.
They're fabulous.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're looking forward to that. And thank you all again for joining us. Take care, everybody. See you all soon.
It's good to see you all.
Come back.
Bye-bye.
Come back.